Let's do it.
Let's do it. All right, guys. Welcome back to the Fitness and Philosophy Podcast. My name is Robby Gustin, and I'm joined by James FitzGerald. And today we're discussing Folly and Fitness.
Dun, dun, dun.
Finally getting to it.
Should have had music to come into that one.
Or play in fitness, or absurdity in fitness, or nihilism in fitness, or rationality in fitness. There were so many different words I thought we could go for here, but
That's right.
Folly, the alliteration, and the fact that have you seen Brandon's video that he made just yet?
Yeah.
The James Against Humanity.
Yeah.
Okay. Folly.
That's how I saw it too.
Folly.
Well, at least I know who's going to go hunting for those things if I ever get in trouble socially.
Well, we figured out a decent way to do it. So whenever I upload one of these things to YouTube, it makes an auto transcription that's timestamped, and then you can just do an Apple find of any text.
Gosh.
So James saying Hitler,
really, you can timestamp it to go back in the video. Oh man. Or you're in trouble with North Korea, bro.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, he could string something together like what's so bad about North Korea?
Yeah. Fitness in North Korea.
We're opening an OPEX affiliate in North Korea.
Yeah. Well, I think you actually said that a couple of times in different ways, so it would go together quite well. What episode number is this?
I was just going back to look at the different folders and things like that. This is either 39 or, here we go with some alliteration, Folly and Fitness at 40, perhaps. So
yeah, that's great. That's pretty cool, man.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm excited to discuss this one.
Yeah, looks like we're gonna try to get into some, of course, language, not just defining folly, but where it sits under nihilism and absurdity. Looks like you're gonna give us a little background too on, where philosophy comes into as a great base support to getting to seeing if it makes any sense once we dabble into where it fits inside of fitness.
Yeah, definitely. So this is part of a larger couplet. So last time we did meaning and fitness, and this time we're going to do absurdity and fitness. And some of the things we'll talk about, like James just mentioned, we're going to talk about the different words and which is the relevant one here. They all mean slightly different things. Some can be more pejorative, some can be more either neutral or positive. Its relation to philosophy, its relation to life. Talk about some Shakespeare connections, to be or not to be, or a tale told by an idiot signifying nothing. Like this is the deeper worry, right?
Mm-hmm.
About life.
Mm-hmm.
What does folly really mean? I think one of the things we'll have to contend with is for any term that you use, and this actually goes back to a famous discussion within philosophy with regard to God and evil. To say God is good needs to mean something. It needs to exclude certain things. You cannot say in one breath, God is good, where we mean by good, not telling a father to kill his son, Abraham and Isaac, or these other things, and then say, well, it's consistent with those things. So to say that something is folly means to suggest there are things that are not folly. And we need to figure out, like, what are the demarcations of that and why would they differ from fitness? If fitness is in fact folly. Spoiler alert. And then we're going to talk about fitness and its relation to folly. So I guess to start off here, let's just talk about different words. So obviously, if you've listened to the podcast before, or really any of your talks, James, about on the knowledge series or just public talks, folly is a very common word you use in relation to fitness, but there are other terms here that could be used, and I think words do matter. So one term here is play, the definition being activities that are done especially by children for fun or enjoyment, could be done by adults. And here there's no inherent purpose per se, but in a good way. Like, when we talk about play, that's one of its benefits, if you will, if we can even say it in that way. Like, it's precisely what's fun about it is the fact that there's no purpose to it. There's no end. It's just, free floating. On the other hand, when we say something is folly, there tends to be, at least in English, and speakers from different languages would need to enlighten us as to whether this is the case in their language, but in our language, there is a pejorative connotation. So a foolish act or idea is an excessively costly or unprofitable undertaking. So here the idea is there's no purpose and it's just kind of dumb that you're doing it, that type thing. So an example here would be thinking you can make yourself taller by imagining you are taller. So that would be folly, right? Because you just can't do that. Another term here would be absurd, ridiculously unreasonable, having no rational or orderly relationship to human life. Meaninglessness, again, no purpose, but in a pejorative way. An example here that I think Sam Harris used to use that I think is a good one, thinking that eating frozen yogurt will make you invisible, right? Like,
I almost spit my water out this morning when I was reading that note.
like, okay, you could. There are lots of others that I could cite that might strike a nerve for people if I cited them, but hopefully that one kind of, oh yeah, let's think about that for a second, right?
Yeah.
So that would be a good example. And then nihilism, the belief that traditional morals, ideas, beliefs have no worth or value. And then the last one I just added very recently was irrationality. Now, this one's kind of tangential to the others, but I think it's connected in a certain way. So pursuing a means that does not coincide with a given end. So there's nothing irrational about eating pizza, chocolate chip cookies, smoking, drinking, what have you. It's only irrational if you adopt the end of health.
Yeah.
If your goal is health, then that is irrational, but it's not irrational outside of that end. So I think that will be worth discussing. So
Yeah.
any thoughts there?
Yeah, no, nice. You got that one in under the gun there. Listen,
Yeah.
folks, just want to let everyone know I didn't know rationality was going to be included as one of the words here. There's going to be under just to play that card. I don't know if I can handle it. Just give me a second. I need to do some thinking based upon that. Yeah, when I think of I like the way actually that you're trying to create. I'm not sure for what intentions other than to see that looking at different words and their different definitions allows us to figure out, what truly folly is, or this actual, let's call it one area means that is meaningless or what without meaning, or the opposite of our previous one. I just like the way that we're going through a number of different ways. The reason why I'm just making mention of that is that any coaches or anyone listening in, this is a good place to start. We've done it numerous times, but it's a good place to go to determine, like, well, what are words that are similar to this and what are ones that are not similar. And what you start doing then is you can create this kind of what I like to call an ordering of what's the, what does it really mean, and then what does it mean just close to that, and what happens when you start moving further and further away from that meaning of that word or the definition of it. You start bringing on these different components. So I really like the way that's done. I'd like to double click on play, because play comes into, I think, what we discussed last time. I forget the context, but these three areas of meaning that people can jam on for relations, work, or play, and as just being a base support, and then you can color, multiple things outside of that. I've more recently read David Brooks talked about a different version of that. Cal Newport has the 4 C's. There's multiple people that give, obviously, these different ideas of what you can chew on as base support for meaning. And but in all of them, Robby, play does come in that area in different ways, And then I started thinking about, to your point, I don't know if it's irony, but I think when people hear the word play, they immediately think of children playing in a park, or there's some kind of, now I'm not really sure if I can provide the, the evidence or the reading or whatever, but it's just based upon, I forget the individual that did the research on play and growth and development, but the action of play, and what they were questioning was, is the action of play innate? And they have seen it in primates, and they have seen it in multiple other mammal and animal life developmental processes. And they were just mentioning that there's kind of a discontinuance in that play in adulthood and Homo sapiens for multiple different reasons, modernity or things, et cetera. And we just start using different words then, over time. We start using words like innovation and creativity and et cetera. And where, I don't know if you see it that way, but I see people being physically creative through dance as being a playful act, right? It's a playful act. They're really just searching out there. And the reason why I'm trying to get people to jam on some of the words here, I'm trying to tie in the physical here, but also see that there's a connector between some of the physical stuff that we do, could actually be no intent and purpose based upon what we've defined as being meaningful. And there's the thing at the end, does it really matter? Does it really matter if we're just being playful? And then it's like, well, what's the definition of play? And then if you keep going down the continuum, right, of play, it ends up being like, well, we're close to being absurd now because we're not even sure if there's any reason to do it whatsoever. So that's what I got from you, putting up a number of different words there. It opens my eyes to using not only folly, in my conversation. I should, at the outset here, say though that I think it's not that I'm taking, any victim state of that, but when I use it, whether it be for CCP or in the public, I don't have time, whether it's on the CCP call nor on a podcast, to explain in full depth how I come to that one word, right? So what the one word does, it's so far removed, right, from play and creativity and innovation and these other areas, right? That it indirectly, can make people say, no, there's no way it can be absurd. There's no way there can be no purpose to what we're doing. Like, it's not possible. And so that's, inherently, folks should know that that's the main reason why I choose it. It's the indirectly, like, let's just be careful now of what you are calling meaningful. And then it doesn't mean that I do it the right way by all means, but then I take a historical perspective, right? An evolutionary perspective, and up to modern times. And this is what we have. It's like, so now let's talk about, well, I think the bigger question is, if you're going to argue, not you, Robby, but if anyone's going to argue, well, it's not folly, well, then it's your burden, in my opinion, then to come up with these like continuum pieces up to prove my point that it isn't folly. Because I would sit in a camp, Jesus, I could give you, hours of stories of whatever you're calling physical expression and the meaning of physical expression and what it did for me and what it did for others and et cetera. That means it's endless, right? So yeah, that's right. That's what I think about for, and I'm glad when you put absurd in there, that's a fantastic word, because it is, I don't know what other way to say it. It's further than folly, like it's, it's to the point where, thank you, because I'm going to start using it more so. If I'm looking across the screen and people are like, fitness is folly, I got it. And you're like, no, it's absurd. Oh, wait now, so I'm going to use that because I see absurd, Robby, as meaningless. That's what I, and if that is the word that I'm going to use for meaningless, then it is for me, it creates this huge spectrum now, right? Go from meaning to meaningless, and absurd is definitely far over there. So I appreciate taking through the starting points of the definitions, and I hope people can do the same when they're trying to decide upon if this is actually a beneficial word, where it should be used, what do we mean when we say it, what are things that are close to it. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think a number of good points in there. A few things that came to mind. So one is, yeah, certainly being charitable, me thinking about the ways in which you use the term, and like, correct me if I'm wrong, but like I've always thought in your case, like there was a bit of a rhetorical element to using folly, right? It's a little bit of a like a, hey, like wake up, kind of recognize that, yeah, maybe a little bit of an implicit challenge, like recognize that a lot of what we do call fitness is in fact folly. And yeah, think about like what ways or what reasons you could give to say that the things that you, and that not you, but like one engages in fitness is not folly. I do think these different terms here are useful, kind of like you were saying, where they're all in one way or another involved with this notion of like meaninglessness or purposelessness. It's just that some are more kind of like we're saying, either pejorative or have a little bit more of a positive spin than others. So like absurd, part of the reason we're using it here in connection with the first episode and this one is existentialism. So like within existentialism, this notion of like life being absurd and having no ultimate meaning. And I would agree with you that absurdity is definitely a notch above folly. I would say, play is, I would put it in those categories you were saying of like, relationships, career, work, and then like play in terms of being a positive thing. Folly is more like, why are you doing it? You're kind of wasting your time. And then absurd is more that existential angst
Yeah.
or dread type side of things.
Yeah. I love that because it kind of, it sets the tone, it sets the continuum, right? You could, if you're going to pick that word, just know where it's going to sit. Just to replay the reason why I think that I'm probably more hesitant to just like remove folly from the language and just call everything play is that this is why I mentioned the innate thing inside of us for physical expression is that I'm just seeing a lot of people who, don't have the competency nor the correct intentions to see physical expression as a playful act. So you can't just say, oh, their physical expression is a playful act, because then I can be Jimmy on the street and interview all these people and they don't think it's a creative physical expression for themselves. Do you see what I'm saying? So it's not play. So this is where I think, we could say something like, we should try as much as possible to move the entire thing towards people perceiving this as play. Like this is a playful act, because I would agree with you, when fitness is playful, it has that innate thing inside of us that we're all capable of doing. Again, as I said, this could be arguable, et cetera, as they move into adulthood and et cetera. It has this aspect of not unknowable, shit. It's like, no, you're going to get variation and perturbations and a whole lot of changes that occur in this, right? And you're going to get longevity, because if anyone knows and needs to be educated on it, when you get into playful endeavors, especially creative playful endeavors, I mean, you can't even complete all the possibilities in your lifetime. Say like that could be, if people are taught effectively, that could be very threatening to some, or that could be like you can open up an entire lifetime of opportunity for people for that. So I think, I like, but I just wanted to make mention, that's why I'm afraid of, play getting smuggled in when the intentions are still not there.
That to me, just as I'm hearing it right now, that raises an interesting question that maybe, you might just say there's an asymmetry between childhood and adulthood there.
Yeah.
But, the central question would be, does someone need to recognize that it's play in order for it to be play, right? So like with kids, if you go up to them and say, well, what are you doing? Well, what do you mean? What do you mean? Just doing this thing.
Yeah.
But you might, and then you could make a similar argument for adults and say like, well, it could still metaphysically be play without someone having any rational recognition of it. But on the flip side, the objection to that you could lob back at me is say something like, well, no, for adults, like there needs to be some deeper intention.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
So we can see
yeah,
that.
totally agree with all that. I see it as like it's like two circles overlapping one another, right? There's not really a demarcation, but there is monstrous differences between little people and big people, in intentions but that's why I wanted to bring it up is, we even indirectly use it. We think about play, we think about kids at a playground, or it's even that for me, I don't know about anyone else, I hear about that noise, like you can hear the kids screaming at a playground in a city back, like that just immediately comes up when someone says play, right? So why is that? Guaranteed it's got lots to do with Daniel Kahneman would say it's just my repetitive experiences of hearing that plus that word, and it's like bing, but then if you go back to Jane Goodall's stuff, if you want to tie that in, if you want to go back to young kids for motor control improvements, right? They try to get young individuals in multiple different scenarios of rehabilitative places through a playful activity that leads to motor control improvement, right? So it's this motor cortex that's being developed that can only be developed if it's in a playful scenario, And so that has to something has to happen there where it's just like, oh, to your point, like you're asking kids, what are you doing now? I don't know, but what we know they're doing is play. So I like I like that the question you asked there, and I would agree. Yeah, there's no, at 18, you just don't be like, oh, that was dumb. I don't even know what I was doing the whole time. There's a crack and some changes that occur. And I think this is an important part. I'm not sure if you're sensing it, but it's an important part of this, like this continuum and the layout of the language for what fitness is. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Two of the things that came to mind just as you were saying that, one is, and I guess these are both related, like the different perspectives you might have on it, or the different layers you might go into with each way of viewing it. So like, for example, when we say play, whether with kids or adults, it's typically this notion of being purposeless in one way or another. But of course, from an evolutionary perspective, it has a very clear purpose. It has lots of benefits, even if the organism isn't rationally aware of those benefits, like that, emotional regulation, motor coordination, all these different things. So just kind of those two different layers of viewing things. And then another thing that I think is worth us asking later on the line with fitness, and I think we talked about this before, where in a progress episode where we were saying, oh, sure, you can say something is progress within this particular sphere of endeavor, but is it progress at large for the human species, right? So like, no one can argue that from a technological standpoint, like TikTok is a progress in technology. It is. Peloton is a progress in technology within those like, very immediate spheres of like, oh, you're able to do this and track this. But then we have to ask the larger question of, well, wait. Like for, humanity and morality and like what we're trying to do as a species, like, is this progress or not? So we can ask a similar question with regard to play and folly. We can say like, in this sphere, is this play or folly? And then like in the larger context, is it, absurdity or not?
Yes. Yeah. No, don't get me on the that one. But as you're saying it, what I came up with as to what I think is just innate for what that you called it organism. I like that because that's what it's doing. It's through this thing that we don't even know what it's called. Even if we say it's play, on your point of like, is it really purposeful, or is there no purpose to it? I think that young child doesn't know necessarily that it is playful, but it's a sense-making opportunity. It allows them to be able to, quote unquote, reach out and kind of figure out their environment and how to navigate that environment. And indirectly, it's bubbling up all these things that will make them really good at reproduction and survival. and all the things, you can call it different words, but all the things that go with that, right? Reproduction is just not sex making machines. It's just all the things that come with growth and development, cognitive function, brain growth, et cetera, et cetera. And then survival is all those intermediary things that allow you to figure out how this thing is going to keep operating at the highest efficiency and whatnot. So that's what I thought of as this. And that whole happens through children playing, right? I mean, this sounds like big things, but they're really important. They're really important. And we know that when this is withheld, I mean, there's so much research on that now, especially in my lane for what I look at, like the differences of, let's just call it childhood activity in a public education setting over the past 50 years. There's numerous things that are coming about that you can't create direct causal vectors from, but it's causing some major issues, right? When this play and constant play and the amount of play and frequent play and opportunity for that is just not a part of the growth and development program. And I mean, like, there's not direct causal vectors. And the reason why I could say that this will hit home is that the thing that we not implicitly, but the thing that we kind of put in there, because it quote unquote wasn't working, when we just leave this, this play in the physical education curriculum, was sport, right? We immediately said, oh geez, this is folly, not we, but like people who are like, we have kids just like running around at recess and like just playing games and like figuring out their environment and rough and tumble and playing in the park. How are we going to score that? How are we going to test that? This is how we made these decisions. It's not much further than that, right? It's like, let's volleyball. There's a thing called volleyball. There's this thing called basketball. There's soccer. We can score them that way. And see, this is how it got bled into the quote unquote physical education. It's actually sport education. Sorry, I'm on a thing for that, but this is where it should make sense to us, ironically, that play can even be questioned as being purposeful.
Right.
Generations gone by where we're like, that's stupid.
Right. I mean, just thinking of the absurdity of that claim, right? Like, like school administrators saying like play is folly. Well, yeah, that's the point.
Exactly.
And that to me, I was thinking of like that. It's such an interesting dichotomy where, again, from like an evolutionary's like species level perspective, there is a very inherent purpose, but you like the kid to actually get the benefit of play can't be saying, oh, I'm doing this for better reproduction later on.
Yeah.
It's precisely the fact that they're not aware of it. And it's just like, hey, just, screwing around.
That's right.
Yeah.
See, screwing around. Like,
yeah.
It's even in our language, right?
Right.
Get in line, elbow here, go back to the end of the line. If you're not doing that, that means that you're being playful. Think about like that's, gosh. So, but anyways, it does make us think about possibly a philosophical conversation that probably needs to be had, particularly on play. Yeah, and extracting that from beyond, further to the left of the continuum, right, of where folly sits is further away from absurdity, and then like, because I think there's lots in there that we can ask some questions on.
Yeah,
that will help that will help my language over time, right?
Yeah.
So depending upon who is in front of me, it's like, for you, fitness is play. For you, it's folly. For you, it's absurd.
Just
and all
depends
of
on
them
the
are
person.
and all of them are crying at the end. It's like,
Why?
yes, I did my job.
No,
Well,
but
instead of being, up on the high horse, just telling everyone fitness is so meaningful, right? Anyways.
No, I think that's where, I've probably talked about 6 or 7 different conceptions of philosophy as we've gone on, assumption questioning and how do all the things fit together. But yet another conception of philosophy that's quite useful is conceptual demarcation and clarification of like, where do these things fit? Are they adjacent to one another? Are they cousins? Are they brothers? Are they sisters? Like, how do they fit? And I think play, folly, and absurdity are all related, but ultimately different. And, if I'm laying my cards on the table, I think there's an interesting discussion to be had around this. And I think I could be wrong, but I think we're probably closer than not on this. But like I would characterize virtuous fitness, or what we have been describing as, capital F fitness, more in the realm of play than necessarily folly. But yeah, I think it's an interesting discussion to be had.
Yep.
So
A last one on this, just because heard about it as you were just I'm going to go along with your point there, that one cohort group that I noticed were had a great career in mixed modal were the individuals that really found the physical challenges that were imposed in front of them as being a playful opportunity to figure out those physical challenges. So some people can chew on that one for a while, where there's just endless humans out there that are going through this mixed modal struggle for all these, and I'll just call them lower order reasons, right? They're uncomfortable. No one wants to talk about it, right? But it's like, I want to find a mate. I want to have a bigger ass. I want to be leaner. I want to, have attention on myself. I want to get to regionals and, because then I'll be popular. I don't even know what it's called anymore, sectionals, right? I want to show people that I'm actually participating in something online, and that creates meaning for me. But then if you extract the 5% that are actually like really happy and find the sport really fun and are really good, what do they do in their training that's different from the other 95%? They find every session an opportunity to play. It's a physical challenge that they're like, oh, interesting. How am I going to figure this one out? This is how they're approaching it. So what am I doing there? That's a playful act, right? You see that? And that's why I'm probably also really, really sensitive when people are like, oh yeah, I can do that too. It's not the action, it's not the act that you need to do to duplicate that. It's this. You need to, this is where you need to go. You need to, why are you doing it? And then it brings us back to like, well, this is where philosophy fits in, right? Ask these questions prior to that action. So
absolutely.
Sorry, I went on there, but I think that'll be continued in our play area.
No, I think that's a very worthwhile discussion. So a couple connections here that we can draw on, and obviously absurdity in philosophy, or life in philosophy, could be, oh wait, no, wait, I almost said it. James put a moratorium on it last time. Not going to do it. So absurdity in philosophy. So absurdity comes to prominence as a major concept in existentialism. So in the last episode, I talked about this movement called existentialism, and just so people are aware, this is kind of like rationalism or empiricism, where like during the time it was being discussed, it wasn't necessarily called this. It's in retrospect, like the Dark Ages weren't called the Dark Ages, and that's even not the right term anymore, but you know what I mean, like called it after the fact. But existentialism, you could think of as, starting in a lot of ways with Kierkegaard and Nietzsche. And there's a really good quote here from the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy about absurdity and its relation to existentialism. So an existential account of meaning and value must recognize both possibilities and their intermediaries. To do so is to acknowledge a certain absurdity to existence. Though reason and value have a foothold in the world, they are not, after all my arbitrary invention, they nevertheless lack any ultimate foundation. Values are not intrinsic to being, and at some point, reasons give out. So one of the things that's really unique about existentialism, as opposed to, Kantian thought, let's say, or rationalism, or Plato and Aristotle, is, working through the philosophical implications, or what it means if life has no capital M meaning and is inherently absurd. What do we do then? Or even further, let's say, there's a very long tradition of religious existentialism, Jewish existentialism, Christian existentialism, where maybe you think life does have some capital M meaning, but what is it to say that life's meaning goes beyond rationality and intelligibility? Like it escapes those bounds of comprehension, whereas like Aquinas and Maimonides and others wanted to say, no, it's ultimately within the bounds of reason in one sense or another. Thinking about what would it mean for that to escape the bounds of rationality and intelligibility. So within philosophy, there is this larger question about what does it mean if life is ultimately absurd, ultimately capital M, meaningless, and what do we do as a result?
Yeah, and that's going to get us into the area of us clarifying the language, right? It's folly, but let's get on with it. And these are, I see that as really big questions, to me personally, right?
Yeah.
But and for today, I think that's great. We could just leave it at that, and maybe go back to other episodes that we've had around this particular area, and also just the most recent one on meaning. And we do give some time to allow people to, you know, play with those opportunities and play with those things that what may fill that thing of
Right.
meaning, on the opposite end of the spectrum, if absurdity is over there and meaning's over here. Yeah, I really like that. Well, meaning like what it does for my brain, of the quote, that I probably should have read it in more in depth beforehand, because I'm kind of stuck on so many things that I'd like to jam on or just discuss with you or just sit with, but we won't.
Yeah, and I think ultimately we can come back to it at some point. But yeah, just getting people to think a little. We're asking this local question, or most of what we're going to be discussing today is this local question about fitness and absurdity, or fitness and folly, and like, is that ultimately folly? But recognizing that in this larger context, and talking about the demarcation problem with folly, like what if the whole enterprise of life, well then of course de facto fitness is, but just this larger question that's asked within not just philosophy, but I think, I could be wrong, but I think almost every human asks this at some point, whether they're super religious or not. Like, they run into some sort of crisis and ask, like, what does it all mean? Like, what are we even doing here? And even if they don't ultimately end with, the answer of like, this is all absurdity or folly, like there is this very deep human question about like, does this mean anything? Is there significance? Is it just absurdity all the way down? So it's whether you're a philosopher or not, is a profound human question, I think, in general. So.
Yeah, I've got a question for you, or your thoughts on that. If let's say that people, and there would be a cohort of people, right? I'm not going to classify them in certain belief, but there would be a cohort of people in a certain belief that do believe that there is an actual like straight line arrow to a meaning of life, right? Now, I can't give you percentages, but I'm just going to cohort like a whole, in some kind of belief, let's say a belief in a supernatural, area that it's not straight line, obviously, and there's lots of variations inside of there. Do you think that is then going to lead to how they create a straight line meaning through other areas? So if they go into this concept of, what meaning is there in fitness, do you think that they're going to revert back to like, well, this straight line arrow here, this is what I really do believe this whole thing is for? And do they then just say, well, so this is how I must approach fitness as being meaningful?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I think there could be exceptions, but immediately off the top of my head, I think there is a straight line correlation, although I can see it going different ways. And I think we maybe sort of chatted about this at one point, but like, let's say your ultimate meaning is this capital M, do God's work, we are God's creation, purify the soul, what have you. You could have one view related to that about fitness, about, keeping up the body, and the body is God's creation and is the vessel for the soul. And therefore fitness has value insofar as part of that project. I can see another religious way of looking at it. Maybe, not that Augustine was pumping iron or, doing bicep curls or anything like that. But you could do another view of fitness where, kind of this soul is great and the body is junk, kind of like, well, why are we even bothering with that, right? Like, our deepest thing is to be worried about the soul, and the body is just, you know what I mean? Kind of an ascetic type view of like, why are we so concerned with our food and our physical expression? Like we should be concerned with the mind and the soul. And so I do think in one way or another, if that is the ultimate thing, there can be a way that you draw a straight line to how you would view fitness or health. That would be my view. Yeah.
Yeah, cool. Would just as a side, would Buddhist monks be in that area too? Just called something different, but focus entirely on just thought process and what consciousness, where it sits. And
Maybe, but I mean,
I just don't know if they're doing 5x5s every second day.
you never know. Rogue actually has some Tibetan Buddhist stuff that they ship out to some the
Awesome.
colors of crimson and dark yellow.
Stones.
Yeah, at the Patala Palace, they've got doing back squats. No, but I mean, it's an interesting question. I mean, if anyone's listening, I mean, I'm sure there's there are plenty of people out there who know more than I do about this, but studied Buddhism a bit in college with Uma Thurman's father, interestingly enough, Robert Thurman. And then went over to Tibet for a bit. And, there's these different threads within Buddhism and Hinduism of, not that those two are the same things, but like within Buddhism, there's this very, very strong ascetic trend of like, deny the body, like, all that stuff, like starvation, going without water for prolonged periods. And then there's, Shaolin monks. How do you get more physical culture than that? Within the same tradition. So that's a very good question. It's interesting, those different forms of expression within that.
I think if we kept going on this back and forth, we'd probably come back to the mind body questioning, and that's where we'd end up, I think. And then using that as a base support going out, like, what do people think about where our body sits? What do people think about where mind sits, and how the interplay is there?
Yeah, definitely. So two other quick things before we get to fitness and folly. So with life and philosophy, there's, this great Shakespeare quote that I think kind of encapsulates the worry really well, from Macbeth. Life's but a walking shadow, a poor player that struts and frets his hour upon the stage, and then is heard no more. It is a tale told by an idiot, full of sound and fury, signifying nothing. Now you could take that last part and sum up James' view on fitness. And I can only imagine
the only way that could have been better is if you sounded like Ian, whatever his name is, Ian McKenna, and his big
McKellen, yeah.
I'm not going to ask you to try it, because I wouldn't want you to slip on that. But
I would do very poorly.
Yeah, that's the only way that could be better. But that summarizes a lot for sure. Yeah, not going to lie, that's in my thoughts.
Yeah, and we could only imagine who goes in the parentheses idiot part there in terms of people from HQ. Anyway, but yeah, I mean, this is kind of the central, not just philosophical worry, but individual worry that people wonder: is there suffering? Are their life's journeys ultimately for naught? And just as some example, last time we talked about what would give life meaning, just to give some examples of what would make life absurd or meaningless if they in fact obtain. And we're not saying they do, and obtain is just fancy philosophical speak for like, if they are in fact the case, or if that's actually the way the world is. That's all I'm saying there. So what would make life absurd or meaningless? If we thought there was some capital M meaning and no such meaning existed, but we lived our lives as though it did. Pascal actually argues against this. He says, well, no, if there's no capital N meaning and we lived our lives that way, we lost out a little bit, but if there was, how much did we gain? If our lives were similar to Sisyphus, where we're just pushing a boulder up a hill that ultimately just rolls back down, if we lived in the Matrix or some other illusory or brain in a vat type world, those are the types of things that philosophers have thought would ultimately make life meaningless or absurd. Now you can have questions there and debates and back and forth, but those are some of candidates for those things. So I think in thinking ultimately about fitness and absurdity, one of the questions we could ask, is about, well, is this just like Sisyphus pushing the boulder up the hill and then it just rolls back down, and it's just, we're doing it just to do it, but there's no ultimate meaning to it. The last thing I wanted to ask here before we launch into the fitness and folly discussion is, and this is going to lead right into it, what sorts of things, James, do you think of as not folly? Because in order to say that fitness is folly, it's got to be a substantive claim. To say it's a substantive claim is to say that there are things that wouldn't count as it. So what things for you would count as not folly or not absurd within life?
Yeah. A discovery, first, I don't know why first thing I thought of, but discovery of a discovery of love, or discovering that there is such thing as love. That's the first thing I think about. you know, Waking up every day, you know, um, eyes open, and it's, that whole idea around, was that just what just happened in the wakeless hours, right? Was I unconscious, or what happened there? But my brain was still going and my body was still pumping, but I don't have like this real clear connection to it. So I think waking up every day is it's just a part of the process. I think learning and adaptation is not folly. Um, I'm just trying to think. I'm just spitballing here what's coming to my mind, but to the simple things of taking this walking route to school, and you're taking this walking route hundreds of times a year, and you get a chance to just contemplate whether you're listening to music or whatever, and you always know that there's this certain sidewalk crack, there's a crack between the sidewalk breaks where you've only tripped up on that thing one time. It could be as simple as that. It's like that learning there is a really very, very, very small but massive idea of learning from your mistakes, quote unquote, or learning or tripping up, and then creating more efficiency. In the story of efficiency, meaning you did it 100 times more, but it's like every time you're almost at the point now you're unconsciously competent of that crack being higher, and you're not going to fall over it again. So I think that learning and adaptations would be not folly. And I'll just stop there. It's a question. I appreciate the question too, because I was about to ask right away prior to you starting there, your thoughts on this. Is there another way of going about getting to what folly means, but not this direction? Like, is there another way of going about it by not necessarily doing I guess to use the word, a demarcation or continuum between what is and what is not folly, right? So anyways, I gave you some things that I thought about right away that may need more. And I appreciate asking the question. The reason why I said that is because I'll be able to sit with it a lot more, to clarify it. But then secondly, what's your thoughts on that? Is there another way of going about it?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I really appreciate the answers. And I think just from you having said that, I think one of the questions I come away with is like, if learning adaptation or not folly, in what sense could we say that fitness overlaps or does not overlap with that? But yeah, I mean, you can just very straight away start with like the definition like we did up above. It doesn't necessarily need to be starting from, what is not folly. I think part of the reason I asked it in that particular way is because one of the things that comes up in existentialism and this view that life could perhaps be absurd is that maybe the whole project is, in which case, like, what makes fitness any different, right? Like, why isn't art folly? Why isn't music folly? Why isn't philosophy folly?
Mm-hmm.
In which case, like, how is it in any way substantive to say fitness is folly?
Mm-hmm.
That's to say something that applies to every other endeavor that we choose to engage in. Like, I should send this to you. Brandon sent me this TikTok about like, I know this is going to sound tangentially related, but I promise it comes back. So like TikTok about like, how did they come up with like winter sports? And they're like sprinting, but on ice. You look like a squirrel as you do like the ski jump and like, hunting, but in the winter, and like, cross country skiing, like a bobsled, and just like we give away gold medals for these things, and people train for 4 years, but like it's just this weird, wacky, like, how is that?
Afternoon.
Yeah.
It's
How is
weird.
this not? How is this not any more or less folly of snowboarding? I love snowboarding, but like, how is this any more or less folly than anything else? And but then you can apply that to any intellectual endeavor too, like Egyptologists. Like, okay, how is that making my life better or any more meaningful? Like, it's interesting,
Mhm.
but you know what I mean? Like, going back to this notion of like reasons ultimately bottom out. Um, Part of what makes these things all interesting and what passion derives from is this notion of like, it's intrinsically interesting, full
Mhm.
stop. Like,
Yeah.
there's so that's part of the reason why I went from the other direction, is like this question of, well, how much substance are we attaching to this saying fitness is folly? Is that really something unique to fitness that couldn't be applied to other endeavors, or is that equally true of literature? Is
Mhm.
that equally true of philosophy? And in what ways are those different or not? So that's kind of how I was in picturing it, I guess.
Yeah, solid. Yeah, I also thought about in there how over time, just to your point on art, it is possible where over time art can be considered absurd. It's just how people at the current time are viewing the world, right? So,
Right.
because I don't know, I'm just gonna guess, but um, it is a really, I don't know why you picked art, by the way, but with the the technology, right? So having a phone that now is indirectly, if it's not now, then a number of years, digital photography is really going to change the concept, what photography is, and also NFTs and what we consider artistic endeavors, right? Like, I'm just trying to say, like back in 1965, if that was a good year. If I apologize if I'm bastardizing it, but to see and to watch Jackson Pollock go through something for a number of weeks, like, and see, just imagine the appreciation that someone may have when they finally see the finished product, right? So I think it's the time and how you view the world would determine, if you're finding it meaningful. Um, I'm not sure if that correlates to what we're talking about too. Let me make an attempt. I think it does, because I did pick up on what you were saying there too for where fitness fits in here, because it is that it's going back to, I think, like you mentioned, the Winter Olympics, is that I'm just really, really sensitive to people thinking that there's meaning in the snowboarding up and down, because of the aesthetics, right? So but they're not going deeper and jumping over and like talking to Sean White and listening to his story and asking him like, what did you as a person gain from this with all this practice, right? And I think that's the stuff that people don't get. And so this is very, similar to what my issue is with fitness, right? Is they see the thing happening and they're like, that's the thing, that's what I need to do, that's meaningful. And I'm saying, no, it's not. It's actually folly, right? Dot, dot, dot. Let's discuss it, right? Let's break it down, right? The actual act needs to be this playful expression of yourself. I'm just shortening the words, but so I'm hearing what you're saying there for the ironically funny example of the Winter Olympics and how they came about. It does tie into this. It does tie into this because what we see, what we view in the world, and how we, that it needs to be, we need to ask more questions as to what we see there. And that will then help us come up with a definition. So you'll see me on CNN say it's folly, and then you'll get me for 4 hours. And it's like, okay, it's an unbelievable opportunity for people to learn about how to express themselves. Yeah.
We got to get you on CNN, James.
Not sure why that came. I think it keeps coming up because of the classic, tropes that people would use of like trying to explain a topic, right? You just have 3 minutes, So that's what.
But to go back to your question about like why I used art, I mean, it was, partly just an example, but it actually directly connects to exactly what we were talking about. Kant and others, one of the ways they philosophically characterize art is something that is inherently without a purpose, yet still has value or meaning. It has no utility, no purpose,
Mm-hmm.
still has some sort of intrinsic value or meaning. And going back to the notion of play or folly or absurdity, this notion of like purposelessness, no inherent end to it, but perhaps non-pejoratively, may have some value or meaning to it.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, that's why I drew out for a recent knowledge series this conversation of moving from a novice coach up to a grandmaster and the concept. And the same thing applies, I think, in a lot of systems that, if said another way, the further you get towards grandmaster and detachment from the whole process and transcendence and including everything that you've learned, right? That actually is the highest form of the artist act. Right. So there it is again. There's actually no, real big purpose to it. Now, down below, when you're the scientist, you're like, I got to come up with these ideas and I got to learn all these things and I got to put it through the process and put it through the loop, right? To make sure and at that point, there's a lot of purpose to that because it's the gaining of skills and et cetera. So I'm just using another example, a more recent conversation we've had of moving from the scientist to the artist over time as a coach, right? To hit again on your point of, this is where it comes in again, is like, how much purpose is there at the end if the overarching goal is to be the highest form of an artist? Well, that's it. It's to be, as I said in psychological terms, unconscious competence, right? You don't even know what's happening or why you're doing what you're doing. You see, so the act of questioning doesn't even matter. It's just like, it's just so good. What do you mean by good? Oh, I don't know. Yeah.
it's just the muse coming down and delivering,
Yes, that's the
song of fitness in our ears.
You know what I meant. You know what I was saying.
I wake up every morning and I pray to the muse of Dave Castro, and he hums his. He hums his open workouts into my mind. I'm just I speak in tongues and anyway. So with all that,
you said the idiot full of sound and fury on stage.
No, that's that would be a clear candidate. Oh man, well, he's not at CrossFit anymore, so I'm not going to get a cease and desist. Hopefully, we'll see. I would honestly, if that were to come to pass, I would be more.
You'd send it to OPEX HQ.
I would be more happy / astounded that he is listening to our podcast than anything else. But,
well, like you said, you can just search Google for when it comes up in.
Oh yeah.
Right. So
this will come back to haunt me later on. We'll see. So to get to fitness and absurdity, I think, if we put things on a spectrum here, anyone within fitness has to grant that there are certain things that are absurd, right? And you could throw in shake weights or belly wraps or, GHD bench press and then I think, you could go a little bit further and say, well, snatching and cleaning, jerking and workouts and things like that. That's, maybe a little bit further. And then there's kind of on the other end of the spectrum, there's, well, the whole enterprise, the whole endeavor might just be, folly, where we mean something like misguided, shouldn't be done in certain ways. And I think that's really where the substantive claim comes in and where the worry comes in. It's a similar thing about life, and it's a similar thing about philosophy, where anyone who engages in philosophy can admit that there are silly or absurd conversations that probably shouldn't go on or be better left by the wayside. With life, there are certain endeavors that shouldn't be considered worthwhile, but with both of them, the larger worry, as well as this whole enterprise problematic, is this whole enterprise absurd or folly? So thoughts there on
gosh, let me get in my captain's seat here.
All right, let's do it.
Pump it up a level.
Full speed ahead.
Is that what the saying was? I really need to pick up my game so we can have like this little banter to go on.
I'm trying to think. I know. I'm trying to think.
What do I need to do? Just tell me what I need to do, Robby. What do I need to watch?
I think it's the original Star Trek with. Why am I forgetting his name right now? Oh my gosh, he's.
The guy just went in outer space. Will
Shatner. Yeah, and there's like a Russian. I'm giving her all she's got, Captain. Like that's basically like that's as fast as the ship can go.
Is that Russian? I think that was the Scottish person on there.
Yeah, that's my heritage. Actually I have Russian in me too, but yeah, I can't do it very well. So, but yeah, or no, was it? Yeah, no, I think he was Scottish.
When people say that they have Russian in me, is that just like a big orgy going on, like a long time ago? What do you mean by that? Just like lineage of?
No, I mean, like my
Or
grand,
some Russian snuck into the picture, like
maybe. No, I mean, like my mom's dad's family is all Russian, although
okay.
yeah, and my dad's mom's family is all like Scottish and Irish. So they're both there, but
Yeah.
maybe it was a big
Man,
old orgy. You
that
never
would be
know.
such wouldn't that be such a cool project? You know, someone from the future comes back like 300 years ago and just picks people up from everywhere and just brings to
Yeah.
this massive orgy and then just puts them back in place. Just like figure shit out, you know? Gosh, that would make things so much better. Holy cow.
You thought this was your lineage, but no, it's actually no, it's this orgy.
That's right, right? And then
Interesting
science reveals the
story.
truths, right?
When we looked up my dad's 23andMe and my mom's and mine, there's like a supposed to be 25% that was like, wait, that should be there, but that's not there. And like, hey, was grandma
Yeah.
doing such and such? And yeah.
That's right. That's right. I like it. I like it. Well, I like it, of course, because I had straight lines with mine, but I'm sure that's a big burden to get if it's like just a second now. I don't know. It seems kind of cool to say that, you know, I got some Russian in there. I got some Italian in there, you know, just, I don't know. Just kind of sounds cool to say it. I'm global. I'm cosmopolitan.
Yeah, I'm global European, not very global otherwise, but global European. One sort or another.
No one ever gets to see us, so they don't have a clue.
That's true. That's
right?
true.
Don't have a clue, which is all good. So, yeah, the original question. Let's go back here. What you were just getting at before I lost.
Is the whole? I mean, so the really.
I'm glad you said
the whole.
The whole damn enterprise. Yeah. Gosh, are you
Like
pulling into Star Trek there too? Is that why? Is that why?
I honestly did not initially think about that, but I think that's a good connection.
Yeah, I mean the chair.
Yeah,
the whole thing. Yeah. Well, I think that you know, it's not. But let me explain what I mean by that. That again, it's very similar to the previous conversations, of where I get a little muffled is that what I currently see as the intentions in most fitness, you know, and that's where I get jammed, you know. Ultimately, let's think about what ultimately we'd love everyone to be doing. Everyone to be teaching and learning about this process of like what fitness is and how it can benefit our lives, right? That's ultimately what I would say we would like to have happen, right? It's this, we're doing this movement, and oh, did you know about this movement? Oh my God, this movement did this for me. Oh my God, isn't this so great? Okay, great. Now let's keep living and get smarter and do things, you know. That's ultimately but what I think is most of the time is being done in a generalized consensus. There's either no competency in terms of what the hell fitness means. And then on top of that, if it is being practiced, it's not done for those ultimate motives. And most times it's not. So I think that in itself could be, you know, an area of discussion, right? Well, it looks like it's being done here, and this is the results that show it's being done successfully over here, et cetera. But I don't think it is. And so is the whole damn enterprise folly? No, it's not. But a lot of it is, you know, a lot of it is because of that point of the intentions that are inside of what looks like the practice of the ultimate motive. But it's not. And I don't know, I need to do a better job of it, but I can see it in coaches' eyes, you know. If that doesn't, that's not the answer, but I can, I all know that they know, right? Like I say it, and they're like, yeah, they're not in it for that. They're not in it for that, and I'm not in it for that. And let me think about that. You know, what am I in it for? You know, so that's what I think about for it. And where it draws this, swaying line, and all the things that come with that, right? So what would be a way to create shift in that towards the ultimate motive? And my thoughts are, I think it's education. I think it's education, meaning not just education on like just give textbooks. No, real hard conversations on why are you doing this, right? The real, and I think just a lot of people are really afraid of what they're going to come up with when they ask a lot of those questions. I just think a lot of coaches and a lot of people who are in front of them are really, and so what do? They end up just being like, listen, man, I'm not concerned about the why, right? I'm just going to keep doing this because of all these other things that I think are the motivating factors.
Yeah, no, but that's super helpful. And I think that just helps clarify a lot of the discussion that you've had around, folly and, so it's not the whole damn enterprise, but it's a whole lot more than people think. And, the substantive stuff is the stuff that's done for the right intentions and for the right reasons. And
Yeah. And if people want to, on that side, you don't believe that, and I'll give it, some numbers, gosh, it's definitely not, 5%. It's 90-ish. And even if I'm just throwing out a number, I'm just giving you an idea of the scale, our idea of the whole thing. And if you still don't believe that, you need to, get inside of different educational institutions and follow the money. I think if you follow the money on all of the educational institutions for fitness, and you also follow the money as to who wins in the attention economy platform, and you follow all the money of who wins in regards to biometrics and supplements and health alternatives and all those things, I think if you keep going down that road, you will eventually see what I see, which is a really big project, right? To make that whole 90% seem that it's really meaningful. Like, it's a really heavy thing. Everything is focused on that. This is meaningful. This is meaningful. Okay, this is meaningful. Now, don't forget to wear the watch and take your supplements and do, it's like, and really you're taking away from that person the opportunity to, for the coach to ask the hard question on autonomy, the coach to ask the hard questions on the why, because we're scared shitless that the person is going to go down the street and go to another biometric and a faster thing and something. So there's the challenge, right? There's the challenge is like I always like to say, if we didn't have all those burdens of like, well, I gotta have all these clients and I gotta have, I'm concerned about the money to be made and I gotta pay the bills for this building and et cetera, we would end up just having a ton of conversations and public square debate and like open the doors to like, oh, you think this is good? Let's discuss this. Let's me and whoever, like we mentioned before, let's get together and talk amongst all people, and we're not concerned about, our political ideology when we come into it, because we're still going to do what we need to do for the project when we leave. Right. But there's just so much concern of losing everything to come into that conversation. I just think it's not had by a lot of coaches and for the clients. So that's a big ask, to say, as right, for that client to hear, listen, it's gonna be a couple of years to kind of develop the skills you need to kind of make this work. It's like, oof, I don't know if I'm ready to hear that.
Yeah, I mean, especially with all the cultural discussions going on today around fitness and, like you said, the attention economy and 6-week abs, and yeah, it's very hard to have those conversations, but worthwhile, but very hard.
Oh, for sure. And that's why I also, we can go back to our previous episode, Robby, was it on utilitarianism or I forget where it was.
Yeah.
Maybe you'll come up with it as I'm thinking about this, but, and this is where the argument always back to that from coaches or institutions is that you're taking this why thing way too seriously, and here's all the data, James, on the changes in lives we've made and the people we've made less fat and the diseases we've prevented, and the what's happening on the street is totally different than what you think. You know what I mean? This is always the argument back, right? And it goes back to our point on what this utility constraint is in the conversation or thought process. It's fucking time, right? Like, that's why I call it folly. It's like I say in different words, for now, like that's working for you right now, right? Of this, oh, I'm gaining attention. I'm being thermogenically, exposed to this response. It's like, is that meaningful? Yes, it is, James. Like, what do you mean? We're getting people to move. People are happy. There's high fives. There's community. See what I'm saying? It all gets just lumped into one area. And that's why I end up in the word that's more over on the folly absurd end, because if we just stretch that out, it's not successful. It's not successful in the overarching initial intentions, right? Which is to whatever, sorry, I shouldn't say whatever. I gotta be more adamant on that, is to teach people, right? To teach them, all the frickin', here's the segue, teach them about all the play that's inside of this, all the opportunity for play and creativity and enjoyment.
Okay.
Parks. Future parks. That's what
Yeah. I mean, if I'm remembering correctly, the future, something like the future ideal gym is something like weren't you saying something like a skate park? Like here are the opportunities, and you go and
all those things mixed together, like the old school. Well, the issue with that is I keep track of the Ospreys up in Coeur d'Alene. I watch them throughout the year and what they're up to, because they have live cameras. My whole point meaning is that to tie that one in, we got to figure something out for the cold locations, though, the northern climates for this or we could be super purist and be like, well, you weren't doing much in the winter times anyways for many, many years, right? You're basically just sitting in and eating all your pickled foods and soups and stews and maybe doing push-ups in your home, but that was it. And then when the sun came out and you were able to go outside, you now have like 3 or 4 months of this opportunity, like a lot of those nomadic individuals did, over time.
Right.
That's a whole other area, but yeah.
Or Wim Hof style and just get out there anyway.
That's it.
So I guess to connect up something that we've discussed before with what you were just saying, because I think that was a super helpful clarification of the enterprise. You've mentioned before, and again, like I think this is a useful example of the difference between what you might have to say on CNN versus like if you have the conversation. But it's all folly. Let's get on with it. Maybe we can amend that to a whole lot of it's folly.
Mm-hmm.
Let's try to ditch the stuff that's folly in favor of the stuff that's more meaningful. Something like that.
It's the all that could be changed on CNN for sure.
Okay.
But then I could just see the memes coming back of Jim Carrey. So you're telling me there's a chance?
Yes. Oh my God. That'd be so amazing.
And
then
I just reach into Anderson Cooper's heart and pull it out. That's basically how I'd finish that one off.
Fatality. So yesterday in my programming, Brandon had thrown in some incline dumbbell curls for me, and it was a video of you doing, at OPEX HQ, these incline dumbbell curls, and I was just thinking to myself, just like you looking over and philosophically like, this is so stupid. Like, why is anyone doing this? That was like the ultimate example of like, why would anyone bother doing it? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It really goes along with our episode today.
This is what you're ultimately afraid of.
Yeah. What, and
people are going to listen to this. They're going to understand it's all folly, and they're going to be doing bicep curls like, this is stupid. It's going to take down the whole coaching atmosphere. Why am I doing this?
And then as I was doing the sets yesterday, I was like, yeah, each rep, I was like, this is stupid. Why am I doing this? Just alternating each rep.
Oh, man.
Another question I was thinking of that's in here, but also something I was thinking of just as we were discussing it is, if we're saying that this is all play or folly, and even when we go with a non-pejorative play, it raises this interesting question about like, is there such a thing as coaching play? There's coaching sport. How do you coach purposelessness?
Yeah.
Is the coach maybe someone who exposes you to different, gymnastics, right? Things that you might, want to explore as modes of play. But it's this interesting question of like, how do you coach play? How do you coach purposelessness?
Yeah. I think I'm not going to deflect this one, but I think that's the bulk of the questioning I'd like to have for the whole episode on play.
Okay.
Yeah, there's a lot in there. It comes back to your previous points, though, on deciding upon that, the mind that we're speaking to, right? But these innate processes of someone, 0 to 18 versus 18 to 85, right? Or I should say 0 to 27 and then 27 to 85. Yeah, because it depends upon who your audience is. I think, overall or generalizing it, to answer your question, you just jam on words around the benefits of creativity, the benefits of becoming creative, the benefits of creativity leading into autonomy, the benefits of creativity leading to you getting excited about innovation inside a movement and movement discovery. And that's why I think I could offer that from my background knowledge on pedagogy and in skill acquisition, and pedagogy in growth and development, and pedagogy in motor control. The play aspect is such a fascinating thing that I totally, the question is excellent, it's warranted, because for adults, that even has to be, put together correctly, because if it's not put together correctly, it will sure as shit look like folly. It will like even more so, what I'm saying? It's probably even like putting gas on the whole thing, right? Because what airs inside there is like, well, it's just unknown, it's unknowable, anything goes, right? It's like that's what I don't want to use the previous term. I don't want smuggled into that, so it has to be done effectively. Yeah. What's your thoughts on that? What's your immediate ideas on play and purposeless ideas for the adult, I should say?
Yeah, I mean, a few come to mind, and yeah, this is super interesting, just even hearing what you're saying right now and just kind of bouncing off it. But one is like, well, there are people who teach art. So, I mean, that's, if we're talking about the highest order of art, there's no reason why there couldn't be, teaching of purposeless activity. That's one thought that comes to mind. Another thought was, maybe eventually on our deeper discussion on play, this notion of like, maybe by 0 to 27, they've been exposed to strongman and gymnastics, and they've had all these exposures. So that maybe as you've said before, that the coach isn't necessary in that regard. But in the interim, the coach can be a useful tool or useful resource to explore those different areas that you yourself may not be familiar with. And it's like, oh, I want to try handstand stuff, but I have no idea how to even go about it. You know what I mean? Like, and sure, you could flop over a bunch of times, but like having maybe a progression, or you know what I mean? That can be useful. So those are a couple of the things that come to mind.
Yeah, solid. I like that. I would also, let's fall back, for coaches listening, let's fall back on principles too, right? So you want to have just to ensure, back to the question of like that the play won't turn into something that's not purposeful for adults. We got to have an accurate assessment, and there, of course, that's why I always start with the coach has to have the competency to be able to do an accurate assessment of cognitive capability, right? Adaptation speed, what their physical capabilities are, even maybe some heavier stuff on like, if I mention the word existence, like, do they know what that word means, or do they, like the whole big project for them and where this kind of fits in. You got to get an assessment of that, right, prior to any of this intervention, because I think on the other end there's so many then like pathways and streams and like designs, right, to get people excited about play and all the wonderful things that are on the other side of it. But I just don't think we take the time to kind of do that accurate assessment to get people excited about that, and see, just ask some of the hard questions, right? Like, which is true. Sometimes happens. Coaches can't handle this concept of autonomy because it actually is a real, truthful thing that their client will just not get it. Like, actually get it. What I mean by get it, like whatever you mean, whatever it is, get it. The material neurons firing, or they just won't get it. So what do? My point is, you don't just like give them anything. No, you got to give them the stepwise progress, right, of that knowledge, so it gets downloaded and they can feed themselves and they start benefiting over time. So that's anyways, we're getting I'm not deflecting that either, but I'm just getting excited around the idea around our philosophical take on what play would mean, and then add it into fitness, because there's lots in there. There's lots in there for the adult, especially. And there's lots of stuff that can get crammed in there. And I think you bring up the greatest point with your question is like, how do we ensure that it's not just useless, right? When we do get into that playful endeavor and creativity. Because you remember, if you want to think about it, just for those who still not jamming on our words for play, as I was speaking about it, I could just imagine the coach listening in and thinking about that. It's like, to your point, you mentioned it, right? Like, I'd like to do handstand push-ups. So how would I do that? See when you get a good, accurate assessment of people, you could really figure out, like, in their life experiences, and it only takes a couple of questions, right? Like, what did you do when you were like 10 to 18 years of age, right? Well, what was your, and because you got to remember that they may have developed an entire program. There's an example, you take 1,000 people, they come into a micro gym, and there's only 10 of them that look at the rope and actually say, now that would be fun to climb up and down. And there's 990 others, I kid you not, who are immediately threatened, and they close the door to the motor programming that's inside of actually attempting that. So you can see how important it is. You and I are just like, oh, it's playful. It's not. It's not even in their repertoire for a concept of play. And so you can see this is where motor control and learning and skill development and consolidation of skills is like a fascinating aspect inside of this knowledge of play.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is a super useful counterpoint actually to my original question. This is why discussion is helpful, because you might on the face of it say, well, how can you teach purposelessness in a certain sense? But then we think, well, if someone's going to play, like, there can't be any rules or progression. But it's like, no, of course. Like, think about someone who wants to eventually do art for joy. Like, you've got to learn the basics. You got to have an assessment of where they at. You're not just going to throw someone into the critique of pure reason if they like want to get into philosophy. Like, you got to take the steps and learn the routes. And then cooking, it's the same thing. Like, maybe you need to learn the basics just to like get your meals done. But if you eventually want to have intrinsic joy, you've got to go from that stepwise fashion up. And similarly with fitness, like, yeah, maybe a handstand walk or handstand push-up or rope climb looks cool, but like, where are you at right now? Where's your strength to body weight ratio? What are your nutrition practices? And like, let's get you on the bike a little bit and let's do some, chest elevated push-ups or whatever it's going to be. Yeah. And then we can get you to that part. So there can be the sense of like, even though we want to get to the intrinsic playful nature of it, like, there's a use to progression and teaching and education and getting you on your way there. You can't just be like, oh, I'm just going to try the rope climb every day 10 times and like, see if it works.
Yes.
It's got to be a little bit more formulated than that.
Yeah, which my point being is that 95% of everyone thinks that's the method. And that's how it's sold, right? And then this is why the creeping shit that I'm having a problem with my own brain is the future holds people just with goggles on, actually thinking that they're going to do it. Like that, I mean, that takes to a whole different area, but like to your question, I'm glad you answered in that way. It was someone asked the question, like, why would we do it if it's purposeful? And then we could quickly say, because that's the overall goal. Now, let me explain what I mean by that, right? Because then it takes them through the scientist into the artist, right? It's the whole pathway. It's the beautiful rendition of all these things that people have to go through. And again, this is the point in the strength of conversation of reality, right? It's like, listen, you're not going to get that in 2 weeks, right? And then I don't know if it's maybe 6 months, but it's not 2 weeks. But can I get you somewhat inspired about the fact of just learning these things and downloading them and getting better at it? So eventually leads to that. And not only leads to that, but leads to that opening a doorway to a bunch of other things. And if you can get people excited for that, you got it. You got them licked. You're going to change hundreds of people's lives by that.
And I think something important in there as well, as cliche as it sounds, but like, even assuming you had someone who came in for an assessment and you could get them it in 2 weeks, like you don't get that artist or that intrinsic aspect without the journey. Yes. You know what I mean? Like without the like the trials and the failures and the other, like, so part of where you get to that level in cooking or art or philosophy is like, it doesn't just come in 2 weeks, no matter how bad you want it. Like, it takes time.
Yeah. Listen, we're just having a circle jam here. I'm dancing around the fire. I'm metaphorically dancing around the fire, like hitting my drums, screaming like a banshee at the top of my lungs as you're saying that, right? Like listen, I'm down with that. That's the whole process, right? But here's the rub. It's like the current institutions and the systems and whatnot, the people coming in and the coaches in their true belief don't believe that that's a big, long-term, exciting journey.
Well, we're not going to be alive for it, but when there will be a time 100 years in the future when this is the fitness and philosophy is the call to prayer, and the views and principles that we've espoused in here are what people live by and guide their life by. So we won't see it in our lifetime, but it's like David Hume, like he his famous treatise of human nature. He said it fell stillborn from the press, like no one cared about it in his lifetime, and then now he's like one of the greatest philosophers of all time. So
yeah, that's funny. It's funny you mention him, because I just read a great quote. Gosh, let's see if you remember this. Did I send it?
Is it the be still a man?
No, it's the simplicity complexity thing that I sent you on. It was in the same booklet.
Okay.
Of exercise and employment being the only two things, something along the lines of exercise and employment being some of these really deep, meaningful things. Anyways, I just picking on a David Hume point, but yeah, fascinating, good stuff.
All right, well, I think that was a good one. So just to kind of recap what we talked about, this was the second part of a couplet kind of talking about existentialism as an overarching thing within philosophy. And we first talked about meaning and purpose and fitness in the last episode. And today we talked about folly and fitness. We talked initially about these different words and getting conceptual clarification on, like, they're all in one way or another involved with purposelessness, but one is more pejorative than another. One's more existential than another. How do they all relate to one another? These deeper questions within absurdity and philosophy, and absurdity in life, about, like, is it just a tale told by an idiot signifying nothing, or does it mean something different? We talked about how to distinguish folly from non-folly, and then use that in our discussion of whether fitness itself is all folly. And I think we came to a very useful clarification that no, it is not all folly, but a whole large part of it is. And then, this question around, like, if it is in fact play, what role can the coach play? Or what role can the coach be in, helping, guiding people through that endeavor? So
yeah, great recap. I'm appreciative of the ability for me to clarify some of my points, and to open my mind to creating better language, and also to take more time to think about, like I did last time with the word significance. On this time, it's what is not folly to me, and just do a little bit of my own personal dive into that one. So I appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. I appreciate the discussion.
Thanks. We'll see you next time.
All right, see you next time.